Welcome, gorgeous women, to another empowering interview within the Queendom Women Uplifting Women podcast. I'm your host, Diana Gatej, RTT clinical hypnotherapist and life coach, and today I have the honor of having as a guest for a wonderful and deep conversation and interview, Victoria Finch, who's a business and life coach, a bestseller author. She's a Dr. Joe Dispenza certified healer. She's the heart healer and so much more. Victoria, welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Me too. Especially since we previously, last week, we talked about so many interesting things. And there was this one thing that caught my attention because we both agree on it. And that is the fact that our past does not have to define us, who we are, and who we decide to be and what we decide to do with our lives. So I would love to talk a little bit more about that because I know we have very similar views on this. When you're thinking that our past does not define us, what does that mean for our listeners, for example? Because it's very good news, actually.
Yes, J.B. Owen said, our past doesn't define us, it refines us. And it really does. Mm-hmm. We spend so much time in the past blaming ourselves. And in fact, studies have shown we have between 50 and 70,000 thoughts each and every day. And of those thoughts, 95% of them are from the day before. And of those, 85% are typically negative. And why are they negative? It's because we're living in the past. We're either living in the past that has that we felt has defined us, or we're anxious for the future. It's usually one or the other when thoughts start to invade us. When we're looking at our past, I believe everything that has ever happened to me brought me to this moment, to be this person, so that I can share and just step into my mission and my power, which is to empower others and to help them rise.
I love that. I really believe that whoever we are now couldn't have happened without all those experiences. And sometimes we label them as being painful or negative or even traumatic. But we are today who we are, and we have a whole future ahead of us that is full of possibilities if we allow it to be, and full of wonder and miracles because of everything we've experienced. And I remember Bob Proctor saying, I always quote him because he's one of my favorite mentors. You know, whatever happened in the past, you've already paid for it. You don't have to pay twice. Okay? So how can we break this cycle of living in the past and regurgitating something from the past that stops us from enjoying the present, basically?
Yeah, it starts with awareness. It really starts with, where are our thoughts going? Are we aware? What types of thoughts are we feeding ourselves? Because you're listening to yourself. You're listening. And what are you saying to yourself? In my instance, when I was about 2 years old, we lived in a very small home, and my parents used to let me stay in their room most of the time because it was 3 bedrooms, and I had sisters and brothers, and I was the youngest of them, so I had no place whatsoever. And when I was about 2 years old, just being a toddler, a little child, when I was told to leave my parents' room, and I went to see my sisters, they told me to get out. I went to see my brothers, they told me to get out. Here I am, this little 2-year-old. I was still in diapers, and when I tell this story, I still can see that little Victoria with no place to go but to sit by her parents' door. And that little girl sat by her parents' door for 50 years. How did she sit by that? How did that past experience affect me? Relationships, feeling unwanted. I would pick the men who didn't want to be committed, because who would want me anyway? I would go and get all of these accolades and all of these this education, and it was all meaningless because my past told me I wasn't good enough. I was unworthy. And having to understand that that was something that had happened, and we'll share this, we'll tell the rest of the story later on, I'm sure. But that past had defined me. And I reached a point in 2017 where I felt really low and so down on myself that I didn't care if I woke up the next morning. And it was all because of a past thought. A past thought. Had a bottle of pills, got ready to take them. And I say it's a voice from God, the divine, that I call God, that said, I made you on purpose. And this is not it. And I knew then that I had a heart issue, that my heart was not where it was supposed to be, because the divine had created me to be perfect and beautiful, just like he created you and everyone who's listening to us to be worthy and enough. And to be able to embrace that, I had to heal my heart. That's actually how I became the heart healer.
Wow. Well, I had goosebumps all over, because your story is somehow my story, and it's everyone's story at the end of the day, right? We all have those past memories that we perceived in a certain way. A lot of times it's a matter of perception. And yes, the events themselves can be tough, but it's our perception that the thoughts and the feelings that we experience in those moments that define the situation for us and makes us somehow make us believe some things around who we are. As you said, right? I felt unwanted, not heard, not enough. And then these perceptions of the world and of ourselves become our patterns of behavior and define our self-identity and self-concept and everything else. And of course, it impacts everything, as you said, from relationships to career to absolutely everything. I loved the story of your rising, right? It's like from that very low moment when you thought you didn't care anymore what would happen, and if you woke up the next day, to this empowered version of you who was always there, you just didn't see it, right? This wonderful heart healer that can empower people to find their journey and their mission and their reason for living. Of course, it made me think of my story, but that's not the point here. What I would like to think, because there's a lot of 2-year-old little girls, 3-year-old little girls, 5-year-old little girls, and boys, of course, but since the podcast is for women, I'm gonna just use the feminine. We're stuck at those ages with all the pain that we felt, right? So although I'm, let's say, a 40-year-old woman in an adult relationship, what I bring into my relationship or into my career and everything else, it's Diana or Victoria or whoever it was when I was 2 and felt rejected and felt not good enough. So what are the things that our inner child mostly needs to hear in order to heal?
Yes. One of the techniques, and I'm sure you use this too, is really having the adult you go back and actually have that conversation with that child. Mm-hmm. What would you say to any child? The things that we say to ourselves when we are in certain states of mind, we would never say to anyone else. Never. We would never tell anybody else that they're not smart, or we would never tell anyone else that they're ugly or too big or too small. We would never say that. What the inner child is really wanting is freedom. Freedom to feel loved, freedom to feel enough and worthy. Words that your inner child needs to hear is, you're enough. And this is one too, especially because I deal with trauma, is it wasn't your fault. It wasn't your fault. And learning to forgive yourself and to give yourself permission to let go. I think that was the hardest, is understanding that it's okay to let go. You don't have to feel this way, that you are enough, that you matter, and that you are seen.
Mm-hmm.
And it's time to forgive.
I love that. Permission to let go. It really rang a bell to me. Of course, I always go back to the story of feeling good enough. And actually, a few episodes ago, I did an on-the-spot meditation with things for the inner child because I was guided. And I always, even in my hypnotherapy sessions, in my hypnosis session, I always start but by talking to that 2-year-old or 3-year-old or whatever popped up. Okay, encouraging the client to tell those things that they mostly needed, they desperately needed to hear when they were small and didn't. Like,
Yes.
enough. You don't have to earn love. Okay? You are
Yes.
lovable exactly the way you are. You don't have to earn it. And it's always so emotional and it always brings tears in my eyes. I always cry with them there because it's like witnessing this first for many of them is the first time that they actually, as you said, say nice things to themselves, right? The very first time when they look at a version of themselves, I love you. Okay. And I'm so happy you're a girl, or I'm so happy you're a boy, because this was another huge wound of rejection, like the parents wanting someone else or something else, or preferring the older brother or younger sister or whatever. So I think there's a lot of freedom in that. But now that you mentioned, a lot of times we hang on to our pain, thinking it makes us a bit special. We get that validation. When you said what it actually made me think of was when I lost my father, and I was almost 14. I don't usually speak about this, but now that you mention it was one of my biggest pains, definitely, because I perceived him as the only support somehow, and I was always closer to him. So his health decayed over a few years, and it was really towards the end, you couldn't really recognize who he was anymore. And that was really, really painful. And of course, as you said, there was a lot of forgiveness that I needed to go for myself because I always remembered that I was mean to him when he was sick, right? Or because as a kid, it was hard for me to be the adult taking care of him. And also, I thought that if I didn't feel that pain, that I would betray him somehow. I would forget about him. So the only reason that I'm mentioning that is because I want our listeners who might be in my shoes at some point in their life to really have the courage to forgive and let go. Give yourself permission to let go, as you said, Victoria, so beautifully, because it's that pain and the guilt and whatever else might be, they're not really, you don't need them as validation for who you are. Definitely. So,
Exactly.
yeah, what would
Exactly.
you tell to someone in my shoes? Because now I've worked a lot on myself, so I can actually speak about this. I can't believe I'm not crying. Not that there would be anything wrong with crying, but I wouldn't have been able to speak about it simply. What would you tell someone who's still holding on the pain, who's still holding
Yes.
on the guilt?
If we're talking specifically about the caregiver,
Mm-hmm.
the caregiver role is very difficult. I
Mm-hmm.
was a caregiver as well. And we sacrifice, there's no other word for it. We sacrifice a lot to care for those we love, whether it's our children or elderly parents or grandparents. It's a huge sacrifice. And at the end of the day, we are in this flesh and bone. It's
Mm-hmm.
so nice to be able to say, oh, I care for my parents and my elderly grandparents, and and you're happy to do it. When you're a caretaker, there's a part of you that is happy to do it, that you're able to do it, but then there's a part of you that it takes a lot. it takes a lot. And when you are in that situation and when you feel guilty, I didn't tell my parents I loved them enough. I should have brought my dad that extra glass of water, but I just didn't want to do it for whatever reason. I was in some kind of mood that day. I want you to know that that parent, that person you cared for, they know. They know it was hard on you and they have forgiven you. So now it's up to you to forgive yourself.
Wow.
In fact, many times, those we cared for, they're watching over us each and every day. We hear them. For those of us who are empathic, or for those of us who are really in tuned, they're there for you. And sometimes it's a matter of taking that time and going back and saying, I'm sorry that I didn't bring you that water. Know that I love you. And when you do that, I believe you will to hear back, it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I love that. These are two exercises that I would recommend to anyone. Okay. If you're
One of the things
yeah.
I'm sorry. One of you mentioned the exercise. I have a client, and she felt very unlovable. Grew up in an extremely abusive home with alcoholic, immature parents, and got to the point where she wouldn't even drive anymore, and just could not see herself as the loving person she was. Her mother at 92, she's responsible to make sure that all of her mother's affairs and everything's the way it's supposed to be. And I did an exercise with her where she sat quietly, took a few deep breaths, and I said, imagine your 7-year-old self sitting beside you. What would you say to her right now? And then we moved to the 15-year-old self. Mm-hmm. And each one grew. And then we went to the 21-year-old self. What would you say to her? And after this exercise, there's so much freedom, because she was able to say, you are lovable. And it's okay if you have a bad day. It's okay. That doesn't make you a bad person. And she's driving. She sent me a picture. And she's like, I drove 30 miles. So not only when she was able to free her younger self, her inner child, she was able to free herself as an adult now. Now handling mom's affairs isn't as overwhelming, because she knows that she is lovable as she loves her mother. And so now she's able to cope and not have the overwhelm that she had before. There are so many different ways that we can find that freedom. Having that exercise and actually speaking to that child, close your eyes, hand on the heart, take a few deep breaths, or whoever that person is, even if they're not with us physically, they're still with us. And that's one thing I would say, it's never, ever too late to have a conversation. And I hear that a lot. I wish we hadn't had that big fight right before the accident. I wish I had taken that phone call. We say those things all the time, and we beat ourselves up with that. And my message is, it's not too late to say those things.
I love that. I was thinking of something that you mentioned when we first talked that really, really resonated with me. And it ties in beautifully with what you've been talking about and the example that we've given. I love that we're doing this very similar exercises, because it's exactly what people need. Speaking of like talking to your 5-year-old and 15-year-old and 21-year-old and so on, you mentioned when we first talked something absolutely beautiful, which was your healing is in your story. And I love that, right? because I've noticed in my experience, both as a client and as a hypnotherapist, that the healing is in the story. So can you speak a little bit more about that? I love the idea.
Yes, your healing is always in your story. Often we have things that are so suppressed that we don't even realize. I didn't realize I was dating non-committal men. I didn't realize that's what I was doing because we suppress things so much. We push things down so much. I felt unlovable or not enough, but I didn't realize how it was driving my life. But when I would tell the story about being that child and feeling unwanted, when I would tell the story of in the United States of America, it wasn't until 1963 that birth control was readily available to women. I was born in 61. And I heard my mother say that she wouldn't have had as many children, not because she didn't love me. It was simply a statement of fact, had nothing to do with me. My mother loved us. She treated us well. We never, I kind of fell in love, but that was because of, I'll finish my story later. But the story I had been telling about that 2-year-old sitting by the door, the story that I had been telling about my mother having so many children, that's where my healing was. My healing was that 2-year-old story sitting feeling unwanted was the thing I need to heal is my self-worth.
Mm-hmm.
It was already in the story. The thing I needed to heal was a sense of belonging because I did. Remember, I said I felt I did not belong anywhere. Your healing is always in your story. So, what story are you telling yourself? What story, what words are you using? What's following the I am? Because those stories is where your healing lies.
I love it. I absolutely love this. I had a client I worked with in February who's an amazing lady. She grew up with a very abusive mom, really, really difficult childhood. She was amazing. And she said to me, we got in touch, and she said, you're the miracle that saved me from myself. And of course, I got tears in my eyes, but actually, I said, I just guided you. The miracle was in you. And I just helped you bring it back to life and to life. The miracle is already in us. And it's true. In our story lies the seed of, just like in every question lies the seed of the answer. In our story, our painful stories, lies the seed of healing. And I love that. So, yeah. I love the idea of what follows your I am, right? We just have to
Yes,
learn to tell ourselves a better story.
yes, it comes back to that awareness, right? Becoming that self-aware. What story are we telling ourselves? I love Wayne Dyer's book, Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life, the Tao Te Ching. And he talks a lot about the things that we say, that when we start to change our thoughts, when we change our thoughts, our emotions will change, what will change our activities, what will change our behaviors, right? So you get to decide that. I'm the heart healer. I've never healed a heart. I heal the heart. I've only, like you said, led others to the healing that is already inside of you. I heard a story, and I love this story. There was this couple. They'd been together for 60 years. They've only known each other, and he had gotten sick. Now they're well into their late 70s, early 80s. She has no idea what she's going to do. What am I going to do? I love you. You've always taken care of me. What am I going to do now? And he looked at her and he motioned her, come here, come here. And he whispered to her, you already have everything you need within you.
Mm-hmm.
We all already, we look outside of ourselves for the answer, and we already have it within us. Speaking of Wayne Dyer, he tells, I heard him tell this beautiful story about a man losing his keys in his apartment. He gets ready to leave. He grabs his keys and the lights go out. For whatever reason, he drops his keys. The man is on the floor searching, trying to find his keys. Can't find them anywhere. He notices a light outside his bedroom window. So he decides to go outside. He's outside looking for his keys everywhere. A neighbor comes by and says, "Hey, can I help you? What are you looking for?" He says, "I'm looking for my keys." He and the neighbor are down there trying to find the keys. After some time, the neighbor said, "Where did you lose the key?" And the man said, "Well, I lost them. I dropped them inside."
Mm-hmm.
And that is such a beautiful story to let us know that we're looking in the wrong places for the answers that's already inside.
I love that. It's so true. It's so true because whatever we want, whether it's healing the inner child, healing emotional or physical pain, or whether it's something for our career or a dream home, whatever it is, it's already inside of us. You just need to be aware and bring that version of you that enjoys wonderful, fulfilling relationship, that has a fulfilling career, full of purpose and soul driven, that enjoys living in the dream house and has a beautiful relationship with her own self, right? Just have to bring that version of you to the surface. And I love this. Um, we're coming really close to the ending of the interview, which was absolutely amazing. Any last thoughts, Victoria, for our women listeners out there?
I do want to continue my story, and this is really, really important. When I went and sought guidance from a hypnotist, that's how I got into hypnotherapy myself, because I realized the wonders and how it works. And one thing she said to me, she said, "Victoria, you were so busy feeling unloved, you missed the love that was all around you."
Mm-hmm.
And that was like, wow. And we went back again and had another session. And during that session, I just started pouring and I'm crying. And she's like, "Well, what's wrong?" And I tell her, I said, "It's my dad." My dad had come out of the room. He had no idea I was sitting by the door. He starts walking me, and I can see it even now. He's walking me up and down the hall. He's apologizing. And what I want people to know is sometimes what we remember isn't always the whole story. I remembered feeling abandoned. I did not remember my dad picking me up, because when we have emotion, the emotional impact that is the strongest is what will you typically create the memory. It will typically create, and what the emotion of being abandoned and unloved was stronger than the emotion at that time of my father showing his love for me. Now, as I say that, I want to caution, that doesn't mean what happened to you didn't happen to you. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, when we go through a healing journey, we can often get revelations that we did not see before.
I love that. I really, really love that. My experience, as of course I have my own personal experience now that you mentioned the birth control and everything. I come from a communist country, right? So birth control was utopia, somehow, if not a dystopia at the time considered, since they rewarded women, heroin women, right? Because they had 4 kids or 5 kids, so there was no way birth control was accepted in any way or available. And of course, I've heard my mom saying, you're the surprise that came with old age somehow, because my sister was already 15 years, my older sister already 15 years ahead of me, and all my brother and sisters were a lot older than me. And the message that I got, because she said, I can't believe I didn't want you, and now I love you so much. I never paid attention to the "I love you so much"
Love you
now.
so much.
All that I heard as a kid was "I didn't want you." And it's not surprising that I came out, with the umbilical cord strangled around my neck and suffered from asthma and a lot of stuff, because first I got validation as as the sick child, the,
Mm.
the kid that felt loved by being taken care of, because everyone else was already grown up with some important roles in the family. And the only role that was available for me at the time was a sick child. And then that wasn't enough anymore. And I went into the achiever, the high achiever that had to get validation through results, through going to 2 universities and master's degree and PhD and a lot of stuff. And of course, I don't regret it because I love studying and I still do. And I'm still planning on studying a lot more. It's just that I did it from a place of so much pressure and struggle and feeling that the world would end if I weren't the best, And now, of course, after having worked on my own healing and being on my self discovery journey, that now I know that my mom actually really loves me.
Oh,
And it's time to
yes.
accept that, right? It was a hard
Yes.
time because I felt so entitled to hold on to the grudge of not feeling wanted and not feeling loved. So I think my
Yeah.
message, because the reason why I'm sharing this is for all of you out there who still hold on to the pain, to the grudge, to blaming maybe someone. You don't need to. You're this beautiful, wonderful being of light and love, and life can be such a journey and such a beautiful adventure, such a fulfilling experience if you let go of it and tell yourself the other story, the story you didn't want to look at. Okay,
Yeah.
so this is what I would like to invite all of you as an ending message. Tell
One
yourself
thing I
the better story, yeah.
one thing I always want people to understand is that you matter, you're
Mm-hmm.
enough, and I see you. You're not invisible.
Mm-hmm. I love it. This reminds me of a book by Sarah Prout. I have it over there. It's called Be the Love. And at some point, she had this exercise that recommends, in which, you go walking down the street and you look people in the eyes, and in your mind, you say, I see you. Because this is also a way of seeing us, okay? How many times have we felt unseen, unheard, not listened to, not understood, and so on, that now we can't see who we really are. And maybe through an exercise like this, with you yourself in the mirror and with other people in the street that you don't even know, just looking at them into their eyes and saying, I see you in your mind. I think this is really, really important. It reminds us of who we are. I love it.
Absolutely.
Victoria, this has been an amazing, amazing interview and conversation. Thank you so much. How can people reach out to you? Because I'm sure there's a lot who are going to want to come to you after this and find you and work closer to
Well,
you.
thank you so much for having me. It has been a beautiful discussion. And something magical happens when two people come together in love and harmony. And I want everybody to know you're loved. Pick your tribe. You don't have to stick with everyone. To get a hold of me, my website is justaskvictoria.com. My email is my name, Victoria, at justaskvictoria.com. And for your listeners, if they would like, I do have a free ebook called Healing Your Inner Child, a guide to overcoming trauma and embracing self-love. If they'd like to have that free ebook, just reach out to me and I'll make sure that you get that. Victoria at justaskvictoria.com.
I love that. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. See you next week. Lots of hugs and kisses.
Thank you.
Thank you.